الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الناصح الأمين. اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد، يا عباد الله، عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال: أحب بلاد إلى الله مساجدها وأبغض بلاد إلى الله أسواقها. رواه Muslim. On the authority of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that verily the most beloved of the earth to Allah, the most beloved place on the earth to Allah, then there are the masajid, and the most hated places on the earth to Allah, then they are the marketplaces, aswaqiha, the marketplaces. Ya ibadallah, I want us all to reflect tremendously upon this hadith, that the most beloved of the places on the earth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they are the masajid. And the most hated of places to Allah ta'ala, then they are the marketplaces, the aswaq, the marketplaces. So I want us to reflect upon our relationship to the masjid. I want us to reflect and to call ourselves to account over the past week. How many times have we been inside of the most beloved places to Allah? And how many times have we been inside of the most hated places to Allah? وقال العلامة شيخ صالح الفوزان حفظه الله تعالى: عباد الله، إن من ينظر في حالة المساجد اليوم ويقارنها بما كانت عليه في صدر الإسلام وعند القرون المفضلة يجد فرق كبيرا. The Shaykh Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he says that verily the one who looks at the situations of the masajid today and they draw a comparison from the beginning of Al-Islam and those early generations of Al-Islam, or from that first generation of Al-Islam and those praiseworthy generations, they will find a tremendous difference. They will find a tremendous difference between how we view and utilize the masajid and how they viewed and they utilized the masajid. The Shaykh, he says, فَقَدْ كَانَتْ مَسَاجِد فِي عَهْدِ الْأَوَّلِ مَوَاطِنُ الْعِبَادَةِ. He said, because the masajid in the first time, then they were the places of ibadah. They were the places of worship. وَمَعَاهِدْ الْعِلْمِ. And they were places of learning, where learning was taking place therein. وَرَابِطَ قَوِيَّةً بَيْنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And they were places that strengthened the relationships of the Muslims, that strengthened the relationships of the believers. On a day-to-day basis, their relationships will become strengthened by way of the masajid. The Shaykh Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he says, and I want you to pay attention, in light of that which he just mentioned, he said, كانت في غير الأوقات الصلوات لا تخلو من المتعبدين والمعتكفين ولا من الدارسين المتفقهين. He said that even when it was not time for the prayer, even outside of times for the prayers, for the salawat, you will find that the masjid was not devoid of those who were therein worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even outside of the times of the salawat, the masjid was not devoid from worshippers, nor was it devoid from those who was making i'tikaf inside of the masjid. Because as we know, i'tikaf in the masjid is to stay in the masjid for a particular period of time. Even if a person's intention is to make i'tikaf for an hour, or to make i'tikaf between this salah and that salah, or to make i'tikaf for some hours and the like, then you will find that this was something that was done. Because i'tikaf is not something that is restricted to Ramadan only. In a lot of the minds of the people, i'tikaf is that which only comes in Ramadan. Whereas outside of Ramadan, there's no i'tikaf. This is how we view right now. This is how we practice right now. But this is not how the Salaf they were. So you will find that even outside of the time of the salawat, that the masajid were filled with those who were worshipping Allah Ta'ala, were filled with those who were making i'tikaf to Allah Ta'ala, if only if it was for some hours or the like from the durations of time. It was that which it was not devoid of teachers who were teaching therein, those who had understanding of the religion, those who were seeking to learn and to have understanding of the religion. They were learning inside of the masajid. Inside of the masjid you find there was a place of learning, it was a place of education. There were classes that were going on therein, even outside of the times of the salawat. Let us reflect, let us think about that now. The picture of the masjid then and the picture of the masjid now. The picture of the masjid then and the picture of the masjid now. Do we find the likes of this in our time? That the masajid, even outside of the times of the salawat, are filled with worshippers? With great regret, bil asaf, shadid, even in the time of the salawat, right now in our time, you might find the masjid is empty. Even in the time of the prayer, you might find that the masjid is empty. Whereas, in the first times, even when it was not time to pray, the masjid, it was filled with worshippers, filled with those making i'tikaf, filled with circles of learning, people teaching, and so on and so forth. Where are we from them? أين نحن من هؤلاء? Where are we from them? Where are we from them, ya ibad? What is our understanding? Because the masjid is that place of cultivation wherein we cultivate ourselves, wherein our families are cultivated, wherein our children are cultivated, wherein we learn and we are educated, wherein we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala therein. Allah ta'ala, He says, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ, and that verily the masajid, they belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, so do not call upon, do not invoke anything except Allah Ta'ala. Make the tawheed. How do we establish the tawheed? We establish the tawheed by first and foremost learning about the tawheed. How can you establish that which you're ignorant of? كَيْفَ تَقِيمُ بِالشَّيْءِ تَجْهَلُ. How can you establish something that you're ignorant of? So in order to establish the tawheed, we have to learn about the tawheed. Where are those places, where are those mawaqin that we learn about the tawheed? Where are those centers of learning that we learn about the tawheed? First and foremost, where? The masjid. The masajid of Allah Jalla wa Ala. The Shaykh Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he gives us a glimpse of the importance that the masjid played in the role of the Salaf. And we see the effects that had upon them, the effects upon their character, the effects upon their knowledge and the like. And we look at our relationship to the masajid, and our relationship is one that is most dysfunctional as relates to us in the masajid. Most dysfunctional. And then we look at the effects. We look at our level of knowledge. We look at our level of devotion. We look at our level of striving in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our level in reciting the kitab of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and so on and so forth. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam showing us the importance of the masjid, as it comes in that famous hadith that has been collected by Imam al-Bukhaari rahimahullah ta'ala, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he informed us about sab'atun يظلهم الله في ظله يوم لا ظل إلا ظله. Those 7 that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will shade in His shade on a day that there will be no shade except for His shade. The Prophet ﷺ, he goes on to enumerate them to us. Imamun Adilun, a righteous and a just leader. وشاب نشأ في عبادة الله عز وجل, and that youth that grew up worshipping Allah عز وجل. ورجل قلبه معلق بالمساجد, and the man who his heart is connected to the masjid. Let us stop at these 3, because we're going to see a relation or the role that the masjid has to play in all of the 7 that are mentioned. But let us stop at these 3. The imam that is just. The imam that is just is what? Is that leader that has taqwa. Is that leader who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is righteous himself. It is important for us to remember that the way we are is how our leaders will be. The way we are is how our leaders will be. If we are a generation that is righteous, then we will have leaders that are righteous. That which will aid, help, and assist and be a tremendous asset in the cultivation and education of an individual. To him being one who is righteous will be what? Will be his connection to the masjid. Will be his learning in the masjid, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside of the masajid. You think the imams that are righteous just come out of nowhere? You think the imams that are just pop out of nowhere? No, they have a background, they have a history. And you will find a commonality within their histories. Is that what? Is that they were those who are constant elite inside of the masajid, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, establishing their salawat inside of the masajid. Those who learned, took lessons of ilm inside of where the masajid. Go through the biographies. Go through the biographies of the imams who were righteous. Go through the biographies of those ai who were righteous. You will find that they were those who were constantly inside of the masajid. That youth who grows up in the ibadah. How is a youth going to grow up in the ibadah? He's devoid of the masjid. How a youth going to grow up in ibadah? Only once a week he comes to the masjid, or maybe once a year. For those who only come out and bring their families out in Ramadan. What kind of ibadah you think your children are going to grow up upon now? And that person whose heart is connected to the masjid, how connected should your heart really be to the masjid if you only come to the masjid one time a week? How connected could your heart be? Despite what you say with your tongue, despite what you claim, how connected could your heart be? You in the masjid once a week. How connected could your heart be? وَرَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّا فِي اللَّهِ اجْتَمَعَا عَلَيْهِ وَتَفَرَّقَا عَلَيْهِ. And 2 men who love each other just for Allah, they come together upon it and they separate from it. These are individuals, those who love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is from the fruits. This is from the illustrations of what? Of the implementation of Tawheed. From their implementation of Tawheed. So they love for Allah. They come together for Allah. They separate for Allah. How can that be for a person who hardly you ever see him in the masjid? What levels you think a person like that is going to reach? وَرَجُلٌ دَعَتْهُ امْرَأَةٌ ذَاتُ مَنْصِبٍ وَجَمَالٍ فَقَالَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهِ. And that man who, the woman of authority, of position and beauty, she calls him to fornicate with her. And he says, verily I fear Allah. Verily I fear Allah. You have a person devoid of being inside of the masjid. You think he's going to be upon this level of taqwa? That he can turn down a woman of high status, a woman of much beauty? He can turn her down when she calling him? A man devoid of being inside of the masjid, you think he'll be able to do that? He will have the strength to do that? وَرَجُلٌ تَصَدَّقَ بِصَدَقَةٍ فَأَخْفَاهَا حَتَّى لَا تَعْلَمَ شِمَالُهُ مَا تَنْفِقُ يَمِينُهُ. And a man who he gives a charity and he hides it to the extent that his left hand don't know what his right hand had given. A man devoid of the masjid, you think he will be able to reach these levels? وَرَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا فَفَاضَتْ عَيْنَاهُ. And a man who remembers Allah when he's by himself and his eyes fill with tears and he cries. This is an indication of one who has a soft heart, who has a good heart. If your eyes are dry, that's an indication that your heart is hardened. Your heart is sick. But for the ones who have good hearts, who have soft hearts, who their heart is filled with the iman, you will find they are those who they weep, those who they cry when they remember Allah Ta'ala, when they read the Quran, those who it touches them and their eyes fill with tears. Their eyes fill with tears. It is inconceivable to believe that such a person will be from those who hardly ever is inside of the masjid. هذا أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. يا عباد الله, we have seen a glimpse, and it's a very small glimpse of the importance of the masjid. The ulama that have spoken extensively on the importance of the masjid in the life of the Muslim. So I encourage myself and I encourage my brothers and all those who may reach them my voice to further study and to look and see what the ulama have mentioned about the importance of the masjid. But just based upon what we have covered, it is important for us to know, as Allah Ta'ala, He says in His noble book, إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. That verily those who are the custodians and those who take care of the masajid of Allah, then they are those who believe in Allah in the last day. وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ, and they establish the prayer. وَآتَ الزَّكَاةِ, and they pay the charity. وَلَمْ يَخْشَى إِلَّا اللَّهِ, and they only fear Allah. The masajid have to be maintained. And Allah Ta'ala, He informs us that those who maintain the masajid, they are those who believe in Allah and those who believe in the last day. Those who establish the prayer, those who pay charity, and those who only fear Allah. These are the ones who are those who take care of and maintain the masajid. We know that we need masajid. We know that those masajid have to be taken care of. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in a hadith that has been collected by Bukhaari and Muslim, من بنى لله مسجدا بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة. That whoever builds for Allah a masjid, Allah will build for him a house in Jannah. What have we built? What have you built? What have you helped in the building of? What have you helped establish? What are you establishing? And we know this is the case and the importance of the masjid, and that we need the masajid, and that the masajid are maintained by the believers. Why should the masjid have to ask? Why does the masjid have to ask? Why? You know it needs to be maintained. You know it needs to be built. Why aren't you aiding towards its establishment? How come someone has to come to you to remind you or to encourage you to spend fi sabilillah, to help to build a masjid? How many masajid do we have in Royal Palm Beach? What about Wellington? So on and so forth. But how many Muslims do we have there? What about Loxahatchee? Any masjids there? But there are Muslims who have their address there. Why does it have to be mentioned to you that we need masajid that are close to where we live? So that we can be there for all the prayers. So that we can be there between the prayers. So that our families can be there without having to be driven there. Why would the masjid have to ask? Why would it have to be mentioned to you? We need money for this or money for that. Does the electricity come to your house for free? But you enjoy these ceiling fans and this light and this AC. Does water come into your home for free? Or is there a bill attached to it? Is this a place that we own? Or is there a bill attached to it? Why would it have to be mentioned? Why will we have to ask? And you know the importance of the masjid. Why would you feel sufficient? Why would it be enough for you? Mediocrity, the mediocrity of renting. Why would that be enough for you? That's establishing something? You have a lifetime lease? Come on. If we understand the importance of the masajid, why are we acting the way that we act? Why it gotta be mentioned to us? How come we're not hungry? How come we're not looking for it? How come we don't see the deficiency in ourselves and inside of our families so that it comes to our mind, listen, let's do something. A whole week went by. I have children. They ain't been in the masjid. There are no places of learning the Quran and so on and so forth. This is not sufficient. It's not going to cut it. Why you need someone to think for you? These affairs are more important. When your refrigerator becomes low on milk, that I have to come and tell you, maybe you should buy milk. When it's time for your bill to be paid and it's almost past due, do I have to come and tell you, pay your bill? Or does it have to be mentioned to you by someone, pay your bill, buy some more food? Someone has to say that to you? Pay your rent? Someone has to tell you that? Of course not. So why would it need to be mentioned about the masjid? And the masjid is more important. The masjid is more important on your akhirah than where you're living at right now. The masjid is more important for your akhirah than how much food you got in your refrigerator. So if those lesser things don't have to be mentioned to you, then why the greater thing got to be mentioned to you? Why does the masjid have to ask? هذا يا عباد فاقيموا الصلاة